And just like that, Will, we're live.
Look at that. We're alive. How you doing this morning, brother?
I'm doing really good. I'm in
Good.
my son's new apartment in Albuquerque.
Exciting time for him.
It is, and helping him move in, and got a beautiful place here.
Excellent. I saw the pictures you posted of the mountain range behind his house there. It's awesome.
Yeah, we're gonna take the tram to the top today. You ever been to Albuquerque?
I've been never had time to go out and do anything. Just there for a night.
Gotcha. Well, good morning, folks, and welcome to Emerging Threats Monday. We're going to do kind of a recap, a little update on a few things, and maybe Will's going to take us in a few different directions today. But I'm going to kind of talk about where we are with the situation in Ukraine, and I'm kind of being stymied at the moment by something you can't see, and that is that I'm watching the little processing wheel spin.
Could it be Russian hackers? Is that what it is, Rich?
It could be Russian hackers. But seriously, I've got a really good slideshow, and I hope we're going to be able to watch it today, but it's still spinning. But while we're waiting for folks to jump on, we got our good friend Alan Kelly, Will.
Good morning, Alan. How you doing there, brother?
We're waiting for folks to jump on. Will, you're looking very stylish this morning. That lovely.
Thank you. I spent a couple extra minutes shaving extra close just for you. Can you name the movie reference?
God, I know.
Think World War II. George C. Scott.
Patton? That's right.
Yes.
He was talking to Monty, wasn't he?
Yes, he was. It's Sicily.
Uh-huh. Man, what a great movie.
That was, yes.
Bob Bill is on, says a slideshow, just like being back at work. Yeah.
Death by PowerPoint.
Death by PowerPoint. Alan says better than I deserve. Tony is on. Thank you to the 7 folks joining us already. Please like and hit that share button. We're going to recap a few things for you. And we're going to skip sponsor reads this morning, man. I'm just going to get right into the show. Will, tell us what do you have in store for us this morning?
What I have really is a, hold on. Forgot to put my phone in. Do not disturb here. Sorry about that.
Dr. Gordon Bodson is on. Scott is on. Please like and hit that share button. Sorry, Will.
No worries. It's all good, man. I see Jared's joining us as well. I'm going to do really kind of an overview preview of where I'm going to start us into next week, and that is debt trap diplomacy. And China is very active in this right now, and they learn from some of the best, the Americans. So our own methods are being used against us, kind of like the stuff we left behind in Afghanistan.
Oh, ouch. Too soon?
Ooh, yeah. That's either way, it's right.
I know you can't argue that.
Yeah. What was it? I think it was John Adams or Patrick Henry said, speak the truth, but leave immediately thereafter. So let's talk first. Debt trap diplomacy. What's it all about? It's really about gaining leverage. Getting another country where you want them. And it's so you're decreasing the leverage of the debtor country and increasing the leverage of the lending country. China's using this all over the world to increase their influence, and they're being really strategic about it. They're not dummies, as we well know. They're doing it throughout Africa, South America, and Asia. Jeff Brown says Happy Valentine's Day. Yes, I did not forget. You didn't forget, did you, Rich?
No,
I
did not forget.
Okay, all right. We would excuse you for that because that's important stuff.
Oh, yeah.
So they're using it to leverage their worldwide position. The way I'm picturing it is they're lending money to these countries. Well, where's China getting a lot of their money from? Us. Remember way back you talked about the trade deficit, Rich?
Yes.
Yeah, the way I'm envisioning this happens is we're sending a whole bunch of money over there. They're making a lot of money because they pay the vast majority of their people in their factories, little to nothing. And then therefore they're using our own money against us. It's kind of, it's more complicated than that, but if you wanted to break it down to a simple flow chart, that's the way it's kind of working in my little brain here. So in African countries, the Chinese have increased their loans going out by $95 billion from 2000 to 2014. That's a heck of an increase.
Another thing that that those African nations are able to do is There's a term for it, and I'm gonna it escapes me, but it's like leapfrogging, where
Okay.
they are able to leapfrog technology.
Okay.
And so, like, they're not going to experience landline phones. They're going straight to cell
Mm,
phones. So, does that mean they're going to,
gotcha.
skip into crypto and some of the other things that we had to slowly go through, and they're just able to bang use that technology right away that China's put in their hands?
Could well happen. Happens all the time in the corporate world. As an aside, remember back in the day of the Apple. Oh gosh, the was it the iPod? Yeah, it was the iPod, the music only one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Apple didn't invent that.
No.
There was a country out of, I believe it was South Korea, invented that. Didn't have the marketing chops. Apple did, so they used the stuff that wasn't patented or purchased the patent. I can't remember which it was now. Used their much superior marketing ability, made some tweaks to it, and became the iPod. So that's going to give Africa a huge leg up.
Elke says, "How is the China middle class booming? They don't all work in factories."
There's a lot of middle class, but I can speak as someone who has purchased a lot of goods on the wholesale side from China. There's a lot of you get outside the coastal areas of China, which is where most of the wealth is. You get outside of there, very poor, impoverished country.
Hmm.
Yeah. In fact, this is a few years old. I'm gonna say maybe 5 years old, but there was a stat going around that only half the people in China had even seen a telephone. I don't know if it's
Wow.
true or not, but it was. I mean, even if it's a third, a fourth, 10%, take your pick, whatever the number is, it's an astounding number of people. Um, so back to this here. So for China, they're getting a twofer out of this. Uh, they're decreasing the United States influence throughout the world while increasing their own influence. They're burning both ends of that candle on us. Um,
So they're increasing their influence in the world and decreasing our influence in the
mhm,
world. Can we talk about that for just a second?
sure.
There's an excellent book out there. I'm sure some of the folks watching this morning have probably already read it, but if you haven't, please check it out. It's called The Ugly American.
Hmm.
And it was written, I think, in the 50s by a couple of folks they wrote it, I believe, anonymously. They had worked with the State Department, and they talk about how even back then we were kind of getting our rear ends kicked in the statecraft, if you will,
Hmm.
and went over some thinly veiled stuff, but a lot of it on Asia. So please go read that. It'll definitely be worth your time. The Ugly American.
Ugly American. Okay, yeah, I've checked that out, dude. Um, so just some quick examples here. Kenya, the port of Mombasa that was built, um, is secured. Was a loan from China funded that, and the port itself is the securitization for that loan.
Hmm.
So China will just sit back, and you could eh, wait to see if they default on it. Might even, divert some shipments somewhere else, exert some pressure on somebody not to go to a certain port, and make that happen.
Pretty
Yeah.
slick.
Here's one. This is the one that's an eye opener. Matter of fact, I believe it's this week. We have a U.S. delegation going to Equatorial Guinea to counter this. Um, this one would put a Chinese naval port on the west coast of Africa.
Oh boy.
Yeah. So that would be their first naval, their bounce back and forth between naval base and Air Force base, PLA Air Force. Um,
And guess what?
to
Equatorial Guinea has a lot of oil.
what?
They have a ton of oil.
Yep.
I'll reference another amazing book, Cry Havoc. It's
Hmm.
how Tony Buckingham and Margaret Thatcher's son and a bunch of former SAS guys tried to have a coup in Equatorial Guinea. An
Hmm.
amazing book, and of course, they got caught and spent a lot of years in a hellhole of a prison in Equatorial Guinea. So please
Yeah.
check that out.
Um, and this is where it gets fuzzy for us. Equatorial Guinea has been ruled by one family since 1968. Um, they're notoriously corrupt, as is all too common in Africa. Um, the challenge there for us is they're incredibly corrupt. They're brutal. So if we get too chummy with them, there could well start being some backlash back here in the States for the politicians that want that, who see a bigger strategic picture. Chinese don't have that encumbrance upon them.
And again, I go back to the book, Will, because that's the whole thing with these mercenaries and the backers for this from this British oil company.
Mm-hmm.
He talks about it. They talk to the State Department, the U.S. State Department, like, we're going to launch a coup. We've got this guy, Dr. So-and-so. We're going to put him in as the president. Are you guys okay with this? You don't want to step on any U.S. interests. And they were like, yeah, that wouldn't bother us. Mm-hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, here you go. This is why.
Yeah. Yep. It's there's a 3D chess game going on out there. Mm-hmm. We'll dig into more on that one next week. Another one. This one's I found interesting. Argentina joined the Belt and Road Initiative last week. Officially.
Yeah, that's crazy, man.
Yep.
Now, how does that influence the Monroe Doctrine? You know, I mean,
you're gonna have to refresh my memory on that one. High school was a long time ago, brother.
The Monroe Doctrine, President Monroe wrote in one of his papers that anything happens in the Western Hemisphere, that's America's business. You can't come in our hemisphere and start stomping around, which is one of the reasons why we kicked the Soviet missiles out of Cuba.
I would say you'd have to have a leader with the cojones to make that happen.
The old intestinal fortitude. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Testicular fortitude, as Rush used to say. So I don't know that we have that now. And Jeff brings up a good point there about the Chinese in the Caribbean. Yep, we're going to touch on that one next week as we dig further into this one. Mm-hmm. So China also sees Argentina as a source for agricultural products, which, as we talked about last week, they're doing their best to corner the market on grains right now. So if Russia,
we talked about that last week, right, Will?
Yeah, sure did. Talked about how much they're going to have in stock, physically in stock by the middle of this year. And of course, with Russia right on the sabers in Ukraine, like you're going to talk about here shortly, that's just going to put more pressure on that. Well, excuse me. China has a peaceful space observation exploration site in Las Lajas, Argentina. This peaceful space exploration site, Rich, the Argentines aren't allowed to go inside.
Well, that's weird.
Yeah. I'm sure they're in there playing solitaire on their computers and they don't want anybody to know. It'd be embarrassing.
Yeah, probably. There's probably nothing. But that Argentina is not the only place that they're strutting around in South America, right?
No, it sure isn't. They're playing around in Ecuador as well. They loaned. It's funny how these numbers start seeming small when we talk about a $30 trillion national debt here. Elke brings up a good point. We'll touch on that one too. Yep. In Ecuador, they loaned them a whole $6.5 billion from China to them, and all they ask in return is you sell us 80 to 90% of your oil at market price.
I look at that. That's people helping people right there.
They're nice people. They are nice people. Another one, Sri Lanka. China funded and built, and that's the other part is, and Jeff alluded to it, they're building with the Chinese workers. Part of the conditions of these loans often is the Chinese companies have to build these pieces of infrastructure. So China funded and built the port of Colombo in Sri Lanka. Didn't really need it. There was another well-established, well-used, not too full capacity port less than 100 miles away. But it is conveniently located close to China and close to India, which of course is a bitter rival for China, right off the southern coast of India.
Now, that's something that we probably should do an emerging threat on. What if China and India decided to punch each other in the nose? That could be bad.
That could be really bad, and that's they're taking little swats at each other even now. Here's another.
Did you see what Tony wrote here, Will?
No, I didn't.
says went to book a hotel in Smyrna. I guess he's talking about Smyrna, Georgia, last November for a Glock school until we saw that the website proudly owned by the PRC.
Wow. And I assume that's Smyrna, Tennessee.
No, there's a Smyrna,
Oh,
Georgia. I think it's where Glocks
oh,
are.
okay. Oh, yeah, of course, of course. So I jumped to the Tennessee thing there with you. Wow, it's crazy.
Mhm.
So then the last
Djibouti.
yep.
Yeah.
So Chinese established their first overseas military base there. Djibouti is a very active player in the Belt and Road Initiative, which we're going to give you guys a definition on that here in just a moment. And conveniently located just at the south end of the Suez Canal, just outside the south end of that.
Nothing
So
strategic about that, buddy. Don't worry
nope,
about it.
coinky dink, total coinky dink. No pattern of behavior there whatsoever. Just conspiracy theories. Do I need to get my tinfoil hat back out for that? Is that what's?
You might have to at some point.
Okay, we may have to. Maybe next week. We're not really going down any rabbit holes here today. We're just going to give an overview, and you're catching people up on Russia, Ukraine. So, what's the Belt and Road Initiative? The goal from the Chinese standpoint is to get participating nations interdependent with the Chinese economy, and therefore build economic and political influence, just like the U.S. did through really after World War II with the Bretton Woods arrangement, right? So they're looking to extend that power and get them dependent on the Chinese economy, and that gives them a lever of power. If the Chinese do something, now all of a sudden, 26 nations, to make up a number, at the UN voted with China, blah, blah, blah. So it suddenly world opinion starts looking more in favor of the Chinese. Let's see here. Also provides opportunities for the Chinese companies to work out of China. We've all heard about the ghost cities in China, where they've built cities that nobody's ever going to live in, just to keep people employed. Well, I think they've pretty much run out of ghost cities to build at this point. So a great way to do it is get a twofer. You loan money to a country to pay a Chinese company to build something that the security for that loan is the thing the Chinese people built. So you're basically funneling your own money back to your own people with the hopes that the country will default on that note, and you'll get it back anyway.
Yeah.
So it's just colonization
Clever.
by loans.
It is. And what is the name of it? Debt entrapment?
Debt trap diplomacy.
Debt trap diplomacy. What happened to gunboat diplomacy? I could understand that, but this debt trap diplomacy is.
This one plays a little better on social media, I think, because you're helping them. You're giving them this loan. You're helping them build infrastructure, so it looks good, and then the lender country ends up with the asset anyway, which by then everybody's forgotten about it.
Yeah. Elke brings up a great point here. Will, he says China and India tested the waters with a pretty bloody border dispute back in the summer of 2020, and the world yawned. He's absolutely right. Will it yawn the next time?
Depends whether or not they start launching things into the air, because I actually saw a video of that part of that conflict. It's out there. I think it was on Vimeo somewhere. See if I can dig it up. But yeah, it was hand to hand and pretty brutal.
Yeah, Jeff has given us a link here explaining, have India's actions fueled closer China-Pakistan ties? Oh, there we go.
It's a chess game, right?
I'm about to look into that, Jeff. I'm not familiar with that.
Yeah.
Alan says, is the Chinese economy still stable, or are they going to extend too far and falter?
Good question. And that goes back to Elke's question about the middle class. As my brain cells started aligning with caffeine, the middle class in China, they're doing great, and it's growing. Make no doubt about it. Elke's correct on that. However, they do have a problem, and that is a lot of their upper middle class wealth is tied to real estate, which we know what's going on there with Evergrande and a few other developers over there are really struggling right now. That situation has not resolved itself yet.
Yeah, I was going to say, Will, we need to do an update on Evergrande.
Okay,
maybe we can throw that in at the end of next week's show, because that I'm a little shocked that kind of didn't even really ripple the waters too much, or is it still playing out too early to say?
I think it's kind of a combination of everything, and the news cycle probably has moved on a little bit. I mean, we moved on into other stuff as well. It's, the attention bandwidth is only so wide, right?
I'm sorry. Did you say something? I wouldn't.
Hey, well, squirrel. Um, that whole situation has not resolved itself over there. China is going through some pretty serious stagflation right now, which we talked about back on the economic side. So their middle class is grown precipitously over, say, the last 10, 15, 20 years, but they are not without their struggles. So a great way for China to um, um, distract them from that is some sort of outside threat or conflict, right? So um, the so the last part of the Belt and Road Initiative, the way I think about it, really is a jobs program for Chinese workers, except in another country that also dovetails with a larger strategic plan.
I'm sorry. This reminds me so much of what Cecil Rhodes was doing in Africa. And when we do it's very similar how the United Kingdom grew its influence when it was a rising empire.
One emerging threat current event I came across yesterday. There is a bird flu outbreak in Indiana right now. Now, this one is highly contagious. They're already culling birds at this point, and their concern is with bird migratory season coming on here pretty shortly in the next, say, month, 2 months. I'm not sure exactly when that starts in the springtime down there. Last time a significant bird flu broke out started in that part of the country was in 2015, and they killed off 51 million commercially farmed birds. So something to think about. There's also a big bird flu still going on over in Israel. Remember, we talked about that a while back. They ordered something like 500 million eggs from European providers.
Yeah. Damn.
So
Elke has a point here. It's just distract with an outside conflict like the U.S. and Ukraine.
Yeah. And hey, if that's all I've got for today, because we're just doing a quick preview there. Talking about the U.S. and Ukraine, right before we started, I ran across an article this morning from the AP. And it says the headline is Tripwire for Real War, Cyber's Fuzzy Rules of Engagement. And it talks about how, there's a line in the sand, right? For the world. It's the Russia-Ukraine border. There's a line right there. Well, where's the line for a cyber attack?
There isn't. And that's what we were talking about.
Yeah. And so, but what if Russia just goes in and just decimates Ukraine's utilities, infrastructure via a cyber attack? Does the world attack Russia? No. Nobody knows. Nobody can figure it out. So it's an interesting side note into that whole situation.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Just to keep the people's focus on important stuff, such as how we need diversity in the NFL, not global issues. Yeah, we do need diversity in the NFL. You need more, 5'9", 52-year-olds in the NFL. That'd just make it really fun to watch.
Just give me a contract for a year and I'll retire. That's all.
Exactly.
I can drop footballs with the best of them when somebody that huge is getting ready to hit me.
All right. Well, anything else, sir? I'll get into the Ukraine.
No, let me actually. This is one from that same article I talked about a moment ago. It says here, President Biden couldn't have been more blunt about the risks of cyber attacks spinning out of control. If we end up in a war, a real shooting war with a major power, it's going to be a consequence of a cyber breach of great consequence. And that is a quote.
I 100% agree with that. And that's from Biden?
That's from Biden in July.
Oh, my God. That might be the first thing I've ever agreed with him on.
Hold on,
but he's right. I mean, it's
February 14th. I'm just making a note here, brother.
Well, as we talked about, what does a cyber Pearl Harbor look like? And it's easy, as we talked about when they went into Crimea, the Russians did in 2014. They were going to exploit a vulnerability in a Ukrainian software. And I know you guys, if you're watching this morning and you've been on here before, we talked about it, but exploiting one little piece of code in some little backwater piece of Ukrainian accounting software, and that had ripple effects around the world and did billions upon billions of dollars worth of damages. So a miscalculation attacking a few lines of code to cause power infrastructure damage so that they can roll into a dark and quiet Ukraine sounds like a pretty rad idea if you're Putin. But what happens when it goes global and it shuts down power to everybody? Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a crazy time for that, and the scary part is it's not like you say you can go after one bit of accounting software or whatever, and even the person who sent it doesn't know what could happen.
Yeah, exactly. What happened?
Yeah. Whoa, how did that end up happening? And that's I mean, if a missile is launched or a bomb is dropped, within a certain degree of certainty, we know what's going to happen.
But not with a cyber attack, and that's the other thing. I'm sure a lot of folks that are watching this morning have heard this analogy before. But what if you built an AI and its only job was to make paper clips? And it just, it just run away with itself. It's like, I have to make paper. Anybody that tries to stop me making paper clips, I'm going to, and it does, it thinks in ways that we don't think. I understand, remember artificial intelligence, it writes its own code.
Yeah.
As it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, it's crazy stuff.
Yeah.
Tony says, is that when Obama told Putin to knock it off in the Crimea? Yeah. How'd that work out?
Yeah. Yeah. Putin went, whatever.
Yeah, thanks.
Alan Kelly brings up a good point. Cyber attacks worries me somewhat more than some of our other problems. It worries me a lot, brother. I mean, it's because you want to shut someplace down. Going back to Elke's point, which I said I was going to come back to, and I apologize for missing it. Talking about the pork production, that's Smithfield Meats. That is owned by the Chinese government, essentially through some shell corporation, I'm sure. They produce about a fourth of the pork here in the United States.
I had no idea Smithfield was owned by PRC.
Yep.
I think I just bought some. I think it's in the refrigerator.
Oh, we see where your loyalties are now. It all becomes clear.
I love bacon, bro.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, that's good. I get it. I understand. I like to eat pigs and cows because if they become zombies, they're pretty hard to put down. So,
speaking of that, this China taking over. I'm standing in Lowe's and this old man's walking toward me and he's picking up products and looking on the bottom of it. You're looking at the bottom of it. Finally, he turns to me and goes, ain't there anything in here made in America? The things in here from China. I said, only two things made in America here, pal, are me and you.
Yep.
And I wanted to say, and you're mad about it, old timer. Well, that wasn't done on my watch. I was a kid when Nixon got in bed with China, and here we are. It sounded like a good idea now, that they were smiling all the way to the bank.
Yep. And it becomes that short-term election cycle thinking cycle that we get into. Yeah. Hey, we're great for this cycle, that cycle, the next cycle. The problem is the Chinese are playing a 50-year, 100-year cycle.
Yeah. It's hard to see why not?
Out. Yeah. Right.
Because here's the other thing. Putin has been in office forever. Xi Jinping ain't going anywhere. We're going to cycle through our tempestuous elections every 4 years and just continue to fight ourselves into the ground. It's just, I don't know.
Yeah. And Tony brings up a point. Then they removed the country of origin on meat recently. Yes, they did.
Did they? Wow.
Yes, they did. So, so there's definitely a threat there. So what else you got there on Russia, Ukraine, brother?
All right. Before we do that, Chad says Smithfields is based in North Carolina. And when I was at Bragg, I met a guy in upper management there, and he told me not to buy their meat anymore. China had just bought them. And he said now the best cuts were going to China. Whoa.
Yep.
Just as after the purchase of Smithfields, many quit or terminated. Now they are hiring like crazy to get new unknowing people. Ooh, I had no idea.
Yep.
Okay, says keep in mind our country was founded on an experiment that we all pursue our own interests, not the national interest.
And that's a great point. And I will tell you, I believe if everyone, I mean, it's also fundamental to capitalism, right? If you and I
Exactly.
enter a financial arrangement, we're both, whether I'm buying from you, you're buying from me, Rich. We're each seeking our best interest. Maybe I want your product more than I want my money,
Adam
but
Smith, The Wealth of Nations. That's exactly
yes,
right.
absolutely. So the the challenge with that though is when we talk a grander strategic worldview, when a country can have, what is it, a billion, personal interests all aligned because they control them.
Yeah.
I'm not saying we want that at all, but it certainly does give them a larger strategic advantage.
Yeah. No, exactly. But I was always a fan of Rand Paul, and people didn't like it. It's always too isolationist. But it's not necessarily isolationism so much as it's I'm for free
Hmm.
markets all around the world. Let's trade with everybody, and we may create some indebtedness traps. I don't know
Hmm.
along the way, but and anybody that tries to impact or influence our ability to trade in free market, you're getting the gunboat diplomacy.
Hmm.
Um, but anyway, anything else before we go to Ukraine?
No, no, let's move on to that.
All right, look at
Ooh,
that, getting
look at you
fancy again.
go.
Okay, so this is coming from the Wall Street Journal. Everything I'm showing you here, I think, was out of yesterday's Wall Street Journal. They had a really good view of, so you can see strategically we have Belarus, which is going to play into this, Poland, which, as we talked about, just bought, I think, 252 of our main battle tanks, the M1 Abrams. And here's Crimea, which has been seized, as you can see from this at the south of Ukraine. And so we are staging our troops. This has nothing to do with where we're staging our troops, guys. It's just where Russia is putting their troops. So as we can see here, this is where Russia has arrayed its ground forces, its brigades and regiments. The green squares are its infantry units. You have special forces and airborne units are a light pink, and then of course the dark pink are its tank units. Now look at that. Look what it did in the Donbass region. I'm going to back up one slide so you can just see that. Bang. About 35 to 40,000 troops, possibly more, added in recent weeks, and they are combined with local separatists and mercenaries. And so look what they're doing.
Hmm.
Now look at this. Ground Forces Battalion and tactical groups. This is each one of these little red squares is about 700 to 800 troops each. And these are all professionals. These are not conscripted folks. These are their good ground force battalion level. Like in the Marine Corps, it'd be like a battalion landing team, BLT, or something like that. Now we have Belarusian military units. I'm going to go back a slide so you can see the Belarusians pop in there. Now, and they are standing up and mobilizing. I wonder why, Will.
I'm just a coincidence, I'm sure. Slow
It's
week.
nothing. Yeah,
Yeah, it's
slow week.
just slow week. Yeah.
Now, this is an interesting slide because Putin's position has been like, hey, man, it's my country. I can put my troops wherever I want. Well, look where he moved them from. Let me go back a slide. Look where they all came in from.
Now, I'd like to throw something in here, Rich, because I mean those are some long ways to move a lot of people. That doesn't happen cheaply or without a lot of logistical support, right?
That's
And
exactly right.
one of the things I've heard lately from some commentators is, yeah, but Russia has the same GDP as South Korea. I mean, you know, what's the big deal, basically? Well,
Eh,
there's two ways to look at that. There's the surface level way to look at that, just like that. Like they're not that powerful, right?
It's
Well, the
easy to
flip side,
dismiss.
yeah. So, but then look at it from the other standpoint. They've spent all this time and money to move these troops this far. That is a gargantuan financial commitment for a country with the same size GDP as South Korea.
Yeah.
The United States, we could do that and it wouldn't be that big of a financial commitment as a percentage of our total national wealth.
That's exactly right. Yeah. So again, something's going to happen. I mean, he's not saber rattling for nothing because look at
Mhm.
this next slide, Will. This is
Holy cow.
the scope of that movement, all the
Wow.
way from Vladivostok and all these other ports on his easternmost flank, dragging them all the way. I mean, like you said, to your point about the financial cost to move troops and equipment
Mhm.
that freaking far, man, that is enormous.
Now, it also makes me wonder, moving those troops from Russia's far east near Japan, China's also been making noises about some Japanese islands. Is that to? I wonder if that's to focus the Japanese on China, so that Russia can, decrease the protection on their own eastern flank.
Brother, your guess is as good as mine. And that goes to the whole point of this thing. Is he going to invade? I have no idea. What I can tell you definitively is based upon the things that you and I have been reading, and I'm sure a lot of folks out there have been reading, you don't do this for no reason.
Mm-hmm.
Now, is this a miscalculation on his part? He thought he would strong arm a weak leader and a weak NATO into making concessions? Maybe. And now he's in a position where he's painted himself into a corner, and it's almost like I can't get out now. I don't know.
So here's something else that pops into mind. Um, the let's just say he spent X number of, or say US dollars to do all of this. Taking Ukraine gets him certain things like we talked about last week, gets him, oil, gets him grain, gets him more controls of Europe, which has a financial benefit for Russia. What
It
would
gets in population too, Will. I mean,
it does?
we talked about this in the pre-show.
Yep.
What was some of the numbers that you were telling me?
Let me flip back to an email here. There
And
it
while you're
is.
doing that, I'm going to read Elke's quote,
Okay.
Will, while you're finding
Yeah,
it.
go ahead.
Elke says GDP to GDP is not an accurate comparison. Depends on what the country spends it on.
Mm-hmm.
We are not focused at all. We defund the police and fund homelessness, obesity, transgender, and weakening our southern border. And Tony brings up another good point. He says if Putin doesn't invade, he will look weak on the world stage. Jesse says if Putin really did paint himself into a corner, I cannot imagine that he would be willing to admit he made a mistake. Yeah, totally agree, gentlemen.
And before I go to the demographic side here, let's think about how much money Putin had to spend getting all this done.
Mm-hmm.
There's a financial benefit to going into Ukraine and a power benefit. What would the world have to give him in basically payments one way or another to make up for all of this? I don't think the world's going to do that, because then that would be seen like we run into with North Korea, right? Because they launched the kitchen sink off into the Sea of Japan, and we throw him billions of dollars. So then all he has to do is every time he needs money, he just masses soldiers on some border somewhere, and we cut him a check. So I think everybody's painted into their own corners here.
Yeah, and Chad and I were talking last week as I was driving across country, and we were on the phone for about an hour. And one of the things we talked about is, where did the nation go wrong? And I would probably say you could go all the way back to the Korean War, how we let this war undone at the 38th parallel, and the Kim family steps into this power vacuum, and now we're dealing with them. And I'm old enough to remember Bill Clinton getting on TV and wagging his finger at us back in the 90s, saying, North Korea is like 500 years away from developing nuclear technology. Everybody relax. And it's like, guys.
Yeah. But again, that's going to election cycle, right? When Obama said, Russia, the 80s called, they want their foreign policy back with Russia. Really? And so we're back to the 80s. Cool. I can get my dangling cross earring back on and my jeans with my spandex. I can be cool again, because I'm not cool anymore. Right?
Parachute pants, brother. That's where I'm going.
You know it. So, hey, I found that thing on the demographics in Russia. So in 2021, there were 1.4 million births in Russia. That's a 2.3% year-over-year decrease. So that means their total fertility rate, or their replacement rate, if you want to call it that, fell to about 1.47. Now, that is, you need about 2.1-ish to maintain a population, because people die before they produce more humans.
Yep.
So they got a big demographic problem going on in Russia. They also reported, get this, 2.5 million deaths, which is a 14% year-over-year increase in deaths.
14%?
14% increase in deaths from 2020 to 2021. Wow. That's huge. So as a result, Russia's natural increase, births minus deaths, was a decline of 1 million people. So their population is set to decline by 1 million based on that. Now, they did have a net immigration of about 500,000. So they're still down by 500,000 people. So that brings about a whole nother host of problems. They have an aging population, they have a shrinking population. They're not alone on this. There's plenty of other countries like ours running into the same problems, which is also a big part of Japan's problems.
Okay. Wow. That's that's one of those things, man. I mean, I can look at this, Will, and say I get Putin's strategic concern. Okay, he's had Ukraine as a buffer against NATO for a while. You know, his fears. Why is the timing now? I have no idea. You know, Ukraine has been winking at NATO for a while, but they haven't, as far as I know, made any real on paper commitment to NATO. So I understand he does not want NATO tanks parked right on the border. I get that. But how are you going to maintain that moral supremacy by saying, okay, to stop NATO, I'm going to go ahead and invade Ukraine? Because now you are going to be bordering with NATO countries if you push in, you know?
Yeah. Yep. Hey, just as an aside, can you hear that pump running in the background for me? Okay, good. We got one of those tower gardens. I'm going to talk about that down the road. We're going to few shows down. So we're growing stuff inside hydroponically. So, sorry, just want to make sure that wasn't a bother there with that pump running. Alan says elections have consequences. It boils down to what crisis or situations are on the menu for today's specials, so to speak, or what the population is willing to stomach. And
wow, that could be a T-shirt.
Yeah,
that's great.
Yep.
Well said, Alan. Jeff says a friend of mine said that Russia may wait until the fall to do something to wait for the crops to come in before the invasion. And maybe I just can't see them sitting there that long.
That's a long time to feed that many people and to maintain a crisis, so to speak. I don't know. I can't. Maybe the flip side of that, just to take the opposing view of that, might be he wants to do something sooner than later, get it done before the planting season, and conscript the Ukrainians to do the planting and harvesting for the Rushens. I don't know.
You don't have a tinfoil hat on, do you, Will?
No, I don't. I could, though. It's right here.
Put it on anytime you're ready.
Okay. I've got to get something that's really out there, though.
Okay. Johnny King says, I believe the timing is because we are at the weakest we've been in history. Wow. You may be right, Johnny. I never really considered that. The weakest we've ever been in history.
And let's face it, when you look at the United States as an overall, politically very divided, right? That does not help us project strength into the world. Financially, just broke $30 trillion in national debt. Inflation's rising. The Fed's talking about having an emergency meeting to raise interest rates, which will slow the economy. Yeah, we're pretty weak right now.
Well, Tony has a great question. Well, maybe you can help us with this. It says, has the United Nations Security Council consulted with LeBron James yet?
I believe that's at noon Eastern.
Okay, I'll be watching.
I did notice. I did notice he was at the Super Bowl last night without a mask on. So I believe that's a subtle indicator that he's going to come down on the side of the Russians. I think that's what that means.
Like reading the tea leaves around here.
That's it. Well, hold on a second. That might be. I think that's worthy.
Oh, there we go. Look at that.
Tinfoil hat prediction. Now, again, for those of you who haven't seen it yet, this is my warrior tinfoil hat. You'll notice the little Viking ears right here.
There we go. Give you a solo with layout. Look at that. That's nice.
Yes.
Nothing but the best here at Coffee with Rich and the American Warrior Show.
No expense. This is $900 worth of aluminum at market rates.
This slide right here, man, in all seriousness, this is the one that probably we need to really be looking at.
Okay.
And it's easy to get lost in. It's just another slide, right, Rich? Well, no. And the reason it's not is because what you're looking at here, let me back up so that I can see it clearly. This right here is the missile bases, and it's showing you where those missile bases have moved to. Those red lines, those red boxes are showing you the current missile units that are within reach of Ukraine. And I believe, let me see one more page here. Yeah, I've got too far. Okay, so all their missile bases are well within range of the Ukraine, and let's talk about the kind of missiles they got because Russia, all this crap about GDP the size of South Korea. Defaults on one of these key points, and that is that Russia has something we don't. So does China, and that is hypersonic missiles, as far as I know. Now, Bob Beal, I believe, is still on here. If you are, Bob, let me know. But I don't think the U.S. has hypersonic missiles yet. So Russia has the Iskander M, which travels at between Mach 6 and Mach 7. And this thing is amazing. It can carry about a 5,000 kilogram warhead. It has a range of about 500 kilometers, and it's pretty mean because it is, although it's a tactical missile, just completely designed to be used within theater level conflicts. It can be conventional munitions or thermonuclear warheads. So these things they're moving so fast at hypersonic speeds. As far as I understand it, we don't really have countermeasures for that. Let's see. Bob says this slide makes it clear, to me at least, why Poland is clearly spooked. History probably has a lot to do with that. Yeah, spot on, man. The hypersonic missiles are something that kind of came up on my radar maybe less than a year or so ago. It's just a technology that definitely has the means to change the battle space entirely.
For sure. As an aside, Will Parker asked, what is a Super Bowl? To me, it was the annoying interruption between the good commercials. Just throwing that out there.
Bob says he's not looking to LeBron James. He says we need Dennis Rodman. He's got a point there.
He did a good job with North Korea, that's for sure. As an aside, with Bob's comment about Poland, I saw, the State Department told all Americans to get out of Ukraine.
That's right.
And Poland is only allowing Americans to enter if they are vaccinated.
Say that one more time.
Poland is only allowing Americans to enter from Ukraine to Poland if they are vaccinated.
And that's serious.
That's serious.
That's not hyperbole. Wow.
Yeah.
Bob says, I believe the prevailing perspective is that we have fallen behind on supersonics. That's my understanding as well, Bob. I mean, it's kind of hard to find information on that, and I get it for a reason. We hide our technology for a reason, but as I understand it, from what I've been able to read, we are way behind where China and Russia has. So all this well-intentioned stuff on, well, they're the size of this and that. I will have to say again, it's I don't know, Will. I want to be kind here. It's a false dichotomy. I mean, I don't know of any other way to say it than that. Okay, so let's get back here because this missile stuff is just one piece of the puzzle. So he's moved in all his ground troops, his special forces, his infantry battalions. He's moved his missile batteries in from across the country. Now look what the naval deployments are doing. All his Navy are coming in. Amphibious landing and support ships are transferred from the Caspian Sea last March and have remained in the Black Sea. The Pacific Fleet has moved into the Mediterranean. Everything is moving from the Baltic into the Black Sea. So again, is he doing this investment for no reason?
No. And again, Elke brought up a point up here a little bit further up. The carrying costs are too big to wait much longer. Again, with moving these ships over as well, I mean, it's just that much more money he's putting on a relatively small economy on the world scale to do nothing.
Yeah.
It's and somebody else, and I forget who it was, and I apologize, said even if Putin painted himself into a corner, he'd never admit it. You're right, he can't afford to. At some point, it's like the bar fight gone wrong. You realize you're going to get your butt kicked, but your ego's done wrote a check. You're going to have to cash.
Yeah. Now, this one right here, Will, this is an interesting one too, because what this shows us is these black dots here at the bottom, Will, what that's showing us is these are 8 ships armed with Calibra long-range missiles. And you can see that not only does he have all of Ukraine covered with his land-based missile fleet, but also his naval missile fleet as well are covering it from the south. So again, this is a very strategic deployment.
Wow.
Now, as we talked about the economy and population, put that aside. Let's look again at nukes. Now, the U.S. and the Soviets have about 1,600 actively deployed strategic nuclear warheads with a total of, and as you can see from this, what I was able to find online, Russia has almost 1,000 more nuclear warheads than we do.
Wow.
Yeah. So let's look at the next slide. Combat aircraft. We this is an interesting thing. This is a really good thing. Our troops probably, I can't see them worrying about air supremacy any theater they're in. Mm-hmm. The U.S. definitely dominates that, which is why we in the slideshow that I just showed you guys from the Wall Street Journal, it really doesn't go into where he's put his aviation at, because I guess he doesn't need it if he can pour across the border and pound them with missiles right before it goes in.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, this one's a little kind of an eye chart, maybe a bit hard to read, because I was having trouble finding reliable information on submarine fleets, and you get really conflicting numbers. If you look at total submarine fleets, you're going to see that North Korea dominates with 71, but most of those, if not all of them, are diesel powered.
Okay.
So if we use the Global Firepower 2021 Index, China has 79 nuclear powered submarines. The United States has 68. Russia has 64. They got 64 to our 68. So, and that's my presentation today. Guys, I've been saying it.
Oh, you're killing me, brother.
I've been saying it for people didn't believe me. Will, I had to finally put it up there. People thought I was kidding.
You're killing me.
Look at that.
Hey, at least I got a chance to grow my hair out.
I know. I'm impressed. I love it.
Oh, that's awesome. Happy Valentine's Day to you too.
That's for you, brother.
So, that definitely deserves a tinfoil hat right there.
Yeah. Not at all, man. Sexiest captain of a major commercial airliner. How many years in a row? I can't.
I'm thinking zero.
I don't have anything else, Will. I think I'll just close it out there on this beautiful Valentine's Day. I mean, watch this thing. I will say one final thing. We have intercepted commands to his ground commanders, be ready to launch on the 16th.
Okay.
Now, of course, they have a lot of sophisticated counterintelligence and et cetera. So if we're eavesdropping and we hear that date, it's probably crap. But it gives me a little bit of shivers that there may be a date that you and I are unaware of.
And that may tie in with over the weekend, the Biden administration came out and said that it may have been after Putin and Biden talked for that hour. I think it was yesterday even. But I want to say this announcement came out before that, was that they could launch as early as Wednesday, which would be the 16th. Which of course makes me wonder, why is everybody putting that out there? Like you said, what's, is it an intimidation game? Is it Putin seeing what everybody does when there's a date?
Could be icing the kicker, right?
Yeah, could be.
Yeah. I tell you, Will, it's, it makes me wonder. And also, Biden, of course, is being intentionally ambiguous. I hope they're going to get devastating, whatever. Like, well, what are we going to do? I just don't know what his response is going to be. Is it going to be a slap on the wrist? Is it going to be sanctions, as we talked about in our Ukrainian show? If you haven't listened to it, you can go listen to the podcast. But what sanctions can you levy against this guy? He's been pretty smart. He's off the dollar. He's built his own SWIFT monetary system. I mean, what can we really do to him?
He's divested himself of dollars. He just signed a deal with China to sell his oil and natural gas to China, denominated in euros. Like I said, what are you going to do to the guy? They watched what happened with other countries through the 80s, 90s, and 2000s, and he prepared. So, Tony asked, what's their drop dead date that Putin has before the ground thaws? I just did a quick search for that and found an article. In big picture, they're talking March or April. So I would say probably late March to kick it off to be safe.
Yeah, this week,
I don't think they can sit for that long. Just as far as the logistics of having that many troops all in one area.
I agree with you, Will. And if you look at I'm looking at the weather for the Ukraine this week, and it's rainy. It's not going to freeze at any point during this week. Not at night, not during the day. It's going to be rainy and 40s. So,
oh yeah, so it's starting, especially with the rain. That ground's going to start thawing. That snow's going to melt like crazy.
Yeah.
So I'd
So
say
there you go.
he's up against the calendar. He's up against not necessarily this week, but in general, he's up against the logistics of keeping that many troops fed, housed, keep morale somewhat up that you have to for them,
Well,
um,
and all those ships that are in the Black Sea, man, they got to run on diesel. The
Yep.
sailors got to eat. I mean, it's an
Yep.
enormous expenditure of treasure if you have no intention of doing anything with it.
Exactly. And when it comes back to what would the world have to give him to repay all that and enough to make up for what he would gain by Ukraine.
And so he can save face. He's got to save face too.
He's got to get the profit, the kicker off of it to save face. It's the world's not going to give that up to him. It would be too much of a power play. Tony brought something up I've been thinking about all weekend. What'll happen to the market?
Yeah.
The short answer is I don't know. Here's some possibilities. Not financial advice, just a dumb guy.
Do we need a tinfoil
hair and a tinfoil hat? Okay.
Yeah.
So and is it Guile? Is that the correct pronunciation?
Guile.
Okay, Guile. Yeah, I agree with you on that. As back to the market though, couple possibilities. I think the European market would drop precipitously because they are so dependent on the Russian energy.
Yes.
And that's going to impact them. Even if the rest of the world's able to surge natural gas to Europe to make that happen, it's going to be at a higher cost.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as the U.S. markets go, this is what happens during this time is it's called a flight to safety. Everybody's looking for someplace safe to park their assets. So you can actually see bond prices go up, which is a decrease in the yield. So if you own bonds, you're doing better. However, when you get into the stock market, it would seem on the surface that, hey, our stock market should go down. There's a war and we're somewhat involved. Well, but if all that money is leaving the European stock market, they're going to park it somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
So sometimes it's counterintuitive, but sometimes our market goes up just because people are looking to park their money someplace. So the short answer is I really don't know. I'm kind of waiting to see what develops on that, Tony. I mean, those are the possibilities I came up with over the weekend, thinking back to past conflicts. The other thing is sometimes you see the biggest market drops that happen before a conflict, because the one thing the stock market hates more than anything is uncertainty. Once the conflict starts, we know what we got. Now we can start repricing assets to an appropriate amount. I'll this is just me talking about what I'm doing in my personal account. I'm going to short the European markets a little bit today. I'm not going to go crazy with it though. It's going to be very small and incremental. And it's more of a gamble. It's not.
But are you shorting energy markets, or where are you shorting?
The European stock market in general.
Okay, gotcha.
Specifically, I'm really going to look real hard at Germany, because Germany's between a rock and a hard place. They can't back NATO. They can't back Russia. They're stuck.
Look, anything else on that, Will? Because as you were talking, I had this flash.
Yeah.
If you look back at, if I was to say, name the most important figure of the 20th century, most people might say Hitler, Churchill, Stalin, Roosevelt. I'm going to argue that it was a guy that I don't know how many people have heard of, Gavrilo Princip. You know who that is?
No, never heard of that name.
Never heard of him. No. Anybody on this morning heard of Gavrilo Princip? Don't Google it. It's the guy that assassinated Archduke Ferdinand in Sarajevo and kicked off World War I, because you don't have the killing fields of the Somme without Gavrilo Princip. You don't have the slaughter, the human carnage that was Verdun without Gavrilo Princip. You don't have World War II. You never get Hitler unless you had World War I. So probably the most important figure that nobody has ever heard of, but it's that one miscalculation. This group of young people drinking in a bar in Sarajevo, these young revolutionaries that said, we need to do something. And they decided to kill Archduke Ferdinand. And it almost didn't happen. You can go read the history. But my point of saying all that is miscalculations is what scares me more than anything.
Almost like a cyber attack that gets out of hand?
like a cyber attack that gets out of hand. I mean, these things happen in ways that if you would have dug Gabriel Princip up and said, "Man, my God, I can't believe," he would be stunned that it happened in this way. But here's the kicker: they had created this Armageddon machine that once the dominoes started falling and the alliances had to stand together with each other, it ran away with itself. So I say that because the pundits are saying this could be the biggest conflict in Europe since World War II, or it could be something altogether different and equally horrific, if not worse. So we'll never know. Well, we will know eventually, I guess.
Hey, Jeff brings up, he said, I thought he's saying he thought I said bomb prices, not bond prices. But is an interesting thing. When conflict kicks off, your defense contractors aren't a bad place to look for investment either.
Just saying.
They start selling stuff. I mean, their sales go up.
And maybe Bob knows something about that. Well, I can't get into that, but I'm going to get to Bob's point here. It says, I agree with the perspective that it's hard to see how he recovers from the expenditures to date. However, the flip side is that he has to contend with the oligarchs. If he can threaten retaliation that affects them, that would affect Putin directly. Good point.
Yeah.
Alan says, I will take the tinfoil hat on the sexiest man alive over our current administrative predictions. Tony says, a century long of unintended consequences. Exactly. Elke says, kind of like how Derek Chauvin killing George brought us BLM and wokeness and spades. No pun intended. Yeah. Bob says, inflation hits fixed price defense contracts pretty badly.
Yeah, and I'll be the first to say I don't understand the ins and outs of how those contracts work. My reference for that was the global war on terror after 9/11. Of course, that was a different animal, but we're much more involved in that. So I'm just throwing out there as an idea. Do your own research, not financial advice.
Yeah.
Salon quality hair, tinfoil hat.
That's it. That's all we got. Anything else, Will?
That's all I got, brother.
All right, folks, thank you so much for being on the show today. This is kind of a little update. Will's where are we going next week? What are you going to talk to us about?
Next week, we're going to dig more into this, what China's doing. Really, mainly, we're going to talk mainly about Africa next week, what they're doing there. We're going to dig more into those little quick previews, examples we gave today, and dig more deeply into that. And we're also going to talk about how it ties into rare earth minerals.
And that reminds me, I think you and I were talking or texting yesterday, like, when will people understand that we're in a fight to the death over our finite resources on this little blue ball we're spinning through the universe? And anyway, something to think about. Will, I can't wait to hear your show next week. Thank you so much, Will, for being on and for doing everything you do for this show here, man. I appreciate it.
Happy to be part of it. Hope it helps somebody out.
Yeah. And so till next week, have a wonderful Valentine's Day. Take out your honey and have a wonderful time, man. And let's see what happens with this Ukraine. It could happen this week or it may not happen at all. All right, folks. Until then, Will, take us out.
The fight's coming. Be ready.